Hey, everybody. Welcome back to the Throwing Partners podcast. It's a beautiful Sunday morning here in the Houston area. It's Kirby and Joseph here. Please remember to like, share, and subscribe to our YouTube channel. And you can also follow us on Apple Podcasts now. So, for those of you who want to listen to us on your way to work, or in the gym, or on your afternoon run, we would really appreciate that. Um,
Drive into left. At the wall. It's gone. Tie game.
Joe, actually, it's been a pretty good week for both of our teams. So we're going to give a quick recap about both of our teams. We're going to talk a little bit about the Rickwood Field game between the Giants and the Cardinals. And we're also going to talk about the life and legacy of Willie Mays. So go ahead, Joe. Let's hear it.
Well, this week the Astros went 4-1, playing in games against both the White Sox and the Orioles. So they kind of played two teams on opposite sides of the win-loss spectrum. As of recording, we have not finished up the series against the Orioles. I'm hoping that the Astros can finish this series strong. They need to end on a high note. Even though they did take the first two games of the series, they need to get out of the series with a sweep, because honestly, they need to make up for losing that first game on Monday against the White Sox. And speaking of that first game against the White Sox, they got absolutely dominated by Jonathan Cannon, who was making his who got his first win as a major leaguer, in his third career start. He pitched 8 2/3 innings and held the Astros to no runs. So he pitched a shutout. There's nothing really much to talk about in this game. I mean, they got dominated. The offense did absolutely nothing. They could not figure out Jonathan Cannon. And I mean, I believe that the Astros only had 4 hits across the entire game. So they just didn't play well. I'm not going to, they actually had 7 hits. They didn't play well, though. They didn't do anything with those hits. They left 7 men on. They were 0 for 5 with runners in scoring position. So, it is what it is. Fromber, he pitched okay. His stat line is He pitched 6 innings. He gave up 2 hits, 2 runs. He had 5 strikeouts and 5 walks, so the command was a bit of an issue there. But yeah, Jake Bloss, I mean, he just dominated. Jonathan Cannon just dominated, and there's nothing really the Astros could do to string hits together. So they would end up losing that game 2-0. Move on to Tuesday. Hunter Brown, he continues to step up for the Astros. Him and Ronel Blanco have honestly turned into 2 guys that you can really rely on. And I'll get to Ronel in a minute, but Hunter Brown, he dominated in 6 innings. The Astros would win 4-1. Jordan homer, or no, sorry, that's the Wednesday game. But Cesar Salazar actually came up big in this game after Victor Carantini went down with an injury, and he has subsequently gone on the IL. I believe that was due to a play at home plate where he hurt his leg. So he will be out for a while. Hopefully that he can come back and keep producing for us as he has been, because that's honestly been one of the better signings of the offseason for the Astros. So it's really unfortunate to see him go down that way. But Jake Myers had a pair of doubles in the game, which broke an 0 for 17 slump. So it's good to see him kind of break out of that. And he definitely, he's definitely gotten his mojo back in the last, 3 games. He's played very well, as he has all season. He just went into a little bit of a slump for, 17 at-bats, and he's finally coming out of it. So that was also good to see. Good to see him break out of it. So the Astros would go on and win 4-1 in that second game. And then they would look to win the third game of the series, winning the series against the White Sox. And they would, in a 5-3 victory. And Yordan Alvarez homers in the first game that he played in the series. He was dealing with some family issues, and he was not in the lineup for the first 2 games of the series, but came back and immediately homered. I feel like we see this every time Yordan Alvarez goes out for a little while. He immediately homers. Uh, in 2020 is the most you know obvious example I can use. He was injured for the first part of the season. He comes back his first game against the Mariners, pops a home run, and then says, "All right, I'm gonna head out," and did not play for the rest of the season. So, hopefully we're not in that kind of situation. He was dealing with family problems, but he hit a home run, and he drove in another, and it was good to see because he had honestly been struggling the last few weeks. So not a bad time for him to kind of get a couple days off and just kind of have a mental reset. And the Astros would pull out with a victory. I mean, nothing really much to talk about. Arrighetti, he threw okay. He went 4 1/3, gave up 5 hits, 3 runs, 4 walks. The command kind of got away from him, and 2 Ks. So, not great, but not, absolutely horrible. He did enough for us to be in a position to win the game. And the White Sox aren't a good team, so, it is what it is. And then moving on to Friday's game. Friday's game was probably the craziest, and more, I'm going to say this. It was probably the craziest game of the season so far, and not for good reasons, but this started off what I believe to be the second most important series of the season. So I think it was very big for them to come out and get this win. It's unfortunate, how the game progressed because early on it looked like they were in full control. Even with the fact that their starting pitcher got injured, I believe in the middle of the 4th inning. Let me make sure that's correct. Yeah, he was 3 2/3 innings in, so in the 4th inning, he got injured with a shoulder injury. Jake Bloss making his major league debut. I think he pitched pretty okay for the lineup that he was facing. He was facing the league's best lineup. He gave up 6 hits. A lot of them were soft contact hits. I'm not gonna lie. I thought he did very well avoiding hard contact, and he had 1 walk and 2 strikeouts. He gave up 2 runs in 3 2/3, but unfortunately, he had to exit the game due to a shoulder injury. All night, he had been sitting 95 to 96, and on his last pitch of the night, he was at 90.5 miles per hour. So, hoping that it's nothing long term because I would like to see, how he, progresses. He was kind of on the fast track. Dana Brown, this was Dana Brown's first draft pick as an Astros general manager. And to see him kind of progress the way that he has, it was really exciting to see. He was part of a Corpus Christi combined no-hitter last week. And then he immediately comes and makes his major league debut after that. So, he's got good stuff. The Astros broadcast was talking about it. He's got very good command. He fills up the strike zone, and he's got some good velocity and some good breaking stuff. Opposite of what I feel about Jose Urquidy, where he's in the zone and he doesn't have a high velocity, so he's not missing barrels, and his breaking stuff, it just doesn't play well. But I think that Jake Bloss models out pretty well for his pitch shapes and his command. So I'm really excited to see him come back and potentially, contribute to this Astros team who is hurting starting pitching wise. So outside of the starting pitching, Jake Bloss, the Astros would put up 14 runs. They were all over the Orioles pitching, especially Rodriguez starting the game. He gave up 7 runs, and he was awful in 5 innings. He did have 8 strikeouts, so he did kind of settle in, but it was, the Astros just exploded for that 9-run 6th inning, and you thought that they had the game pretty in hand because at that point they were up 14-3. But unfortunately, Joe Espada had to go to Sean Dubin, Nick Hernandez, and Rafael Montero to try to fill the gaps for those middle innings and try to get outs. And honestly, up 14-3, you should be able to rely on guys like that. I know that I called them AAA pitchers last week, and they are pitching against the best lineup in the league. But what happened on Friday was kind of unacceptable from a mop-up role, which it kind of goes to show that losing Brandon Belak really hurts, because he was kind of the guy you could always rely on to give you length in these mop-up roles. These games that you're either blowing out or getting blown out in. So not having him right now hurts. And like I said last week, it all has to do with roster construction and poor roster construction. But you pitched Sean Dubin, Nick Hernandez, and Rafael Montero. And Sean Dubin would come in, he would pitch 2 1/3 innings. He would give up 1 run, so not the worst. And then Nick Hernandez would come in. He would only pitch 1 1/3 innings. He gave up 5 hits, 5 runs, a walk, and he gave up 3 home runs. So he was not good. And these are both guys that people were screaming about. Joe Espada not pitching in San Francisco in a close game. And again, it just goes to show the lack of, good roster construction is really hurting us right now. Like, you cannot rely on these guys in a 14-3 game. How are you going to rely on them in an extra innings game where a runner is automatically put on second? I don't see it. So the Astros have some things to figure out in the middle relief. But they had to go to Rafael Montero, who had been, decent this year, but his ERA has now been inflated due to this very poor outing. He pitched a third of an inning, gave up 3 runs, gave up 1 home run, and, bad. He was bad. He only got 1 out. So they had to go to Taylor Scott and Brian Abreu. Taylor Scott pitched a third of an inning, didn't give anything up. So he's been, dominant as he has been all season. And then Brian Abreu, who pitched for the 3rd day in a row, came in and he dominated as well. He didn't have any strikeouts, which, that's usually his thing, but he pitched contact, which I find kind of not bad because, recently his command has been all over the place. He found bats, which tells me that he was in the strike zone. So not a bad outing for him. He was able to lock it down, but the Orioles were able to mount a comeback. That was a save situation for Brian Abreu. In the 7th inning, the Astros were up 14-3. So the Astros would go on to give up 8 runs in innings 7 and 8. And they made it scary. Joe Espada should not have to use Brian Abreu in a game where they led at 14-3 at any point. And I'm just going to keep preaching it. Poor roster construction. Having 2 guys in the middle innings who just aren't major league pitchers pitching in that situation. Just not good. Not good. So moving on, they got the win. So, they say that there's no such thing as an ugly win. It's just a win. But that was an ugly win. But it set the tone for the series. The Astros would go on to win, and then they would go on to win on Saturday as well, winning 5-1. They got to Corbin Burnes, which I like to see because Corbin Burnes has been one of the most dominant pitchers in Major League Baseball this season. But honestly, he couldn't match Ronel Blanco. And Ronel Blanco isn't the stepfather. He's the father that stepped up. He's dominated for us all season. I mean, he's incredible, man. He's an all-star, by the way. I said that he needed 1 or 2 good starts last episode. I think that this 7-inning outing, only giving up 1 run against the best lineup in baseball, solidified that he's an all-star. He will probably have, I believe, 1 or 2 more starts before the all-star break. And I don't think it matters what happens in between those 2 starts because he's earned it. He's honestly putting up a bid for the starting pitcher spot because he now is in 2nd place in ERA for starting pitchers qualified in the AL. I believe it's him and Luis Guile for the Yankees that are 1 and 2. So I expect him to be an all-star at this point. You can't really avoid it. He threw a no-hitter in his first start of the season. Uh, he's dominated on almost every other start. He's had maybe 2 bad starts, and I say that in air quotes because those were starts where he gave up 4 or 5 runs, which every Astros pitcher has done so far this season consistently. And he's been the one guy that you can constantly rely on. This was the Astros' biggest game of the season that they've played, probably like the 3rd or 4th biggest game of the season that they've played so far. And he went out there and he dominated for us. And there are not enough words for me to describe how much I appreciate what Ronel Blanco has been going out and doing for us. Especially with the way, he came up as a major leaguer, and he struggled last year when he got the opportunity. So the fact that he has kind of put that behind him and he's been able to reset has been huge. But the Astros would go on to win 5-1. And Chas McCormick had a big game. He had 2 home runs, and he played very well. Gordon Alvarez also had another home run. And Yair Diaz had a triple. So it's good to see him kind of getting things back on track after he didn't play very much in Chicago due to a hand injury. So it's good to kind of see him get reintegrated into the lineup after Caratini had gone down. And Joey Loperfido actually came back on Friday. I didn't even mention this in the Friday recap. And he proved why he needs to be in the lineup almost every day. He had 2 doubles, and he played very well defensively. He had probably one of the best catches I've seen all season in that first inning for Jake Bloss. I believe that was Jake Bloss's first career out, or put out. Not out, but recorded out. And it was very impressive to see. It just, goes to show, what, this roster has kind of, how this roster has kind of played out. And, it just goes to show that Jose Abreu really was preventing other guys that can produce from playing, which, again, sucks to say because I wished that Jose Abreu would have been the player that we knew in Chicago. But it just didn't turn out that way, and he was a hole in the lineup, and he was not creating opportunities for these other people, these other guys that could produce. He just wasn't giving them the opportunity, and he was handcuffing the Astros. So I'm glad that they finally cut ties. I'm glad to see Joey Loperfido come back up and immediately produce because, some people might have been concerned that he would come up and slump because he hadn't seen Major League pitching in a while, but he didn't. At least on Friday, he played well. On Saturday, he went over, but it is what it is. You're not going to get ahead every game. But the Astros would go on to win 5-1, and they've won the series. But like I said, they need to go out and they need to sweep. I know that I think it's been a while since the Orioles have been swept. I know that earlier in the year there was this crazy stat where they hadn't swept since Adley Rutschman came up. I don't know if that's still true, but it would be huge to get that sweep today. And I believe that it is Framber Valdez on the mound, so it'll be interesting to see how he bounces back from that. Not poor start. I don't want to call it a poor start because he did pitch 6 innings and only gave up 2 runs, but it wasn't his best start, so hopefully he can come out there and he can compete against a very good lineup. And, I just have a couple of, I guess since I covered Jake Bloss and Victor Caratini already, just one injury update, or maybe 2 with Luis Garcia. But Kyle Tucker, he still isn't running. He's jogging, according to Dana Brown. But no baseball activity yet, which is really concerning. This must be the world's most extreme bone bruise, which I can see based off of how hard he hit that ball off of his leg. But it's just a little bit concerning because of the fact that the Astros came out and said that he should be ready for that Friday game last week, and it's now been another week since he's been injured, and he's still not doing any baseball activity. So that's a little concerning, but hopefully he comes back stronger, and he keeps putting up those MVP numbers that he has been. because the Astros are going to need it if they really are going to do the damn thing. They're giving me hope again, which, I could either hate or love. I could hate it because they could just rip it away from me again, or I could love it because this could be the sign of, turning the ship around. But they're not going to be able to turn the ship around without Luis Garcia. And they're going to need him to come out big, especially with the Major League best 6 starting pitchers on the IL that the Astros currently hold. They're going to need him to be big, and I believe that he is going to pitch in a simulated game down in the Florida complex, Astros spring training site. And if all things go well and he recovers well from that, he will then go on to start in some rehab assignments, which is awesome to hear. I'm excited to see Luis Garcia come back this season. He had pitched pretty well for the games that he played in last season, so I'm excited to see him come back and see if he can improve upon that. And they're gonna need him big. They're gonna need him to eat innings, and pitch well. And I mean, I think that pretty much wraps up my Astros recap.
That was a great recap, Joe. And just like your team, it's been actually a really good week for the Braves as well. We haven't played the Sunday day game yet, but so far this week they're 4-1, which is really great to hear. They had a home series with the Tigers to start, and then they've been playing in New York for the last 2 games, and they'll finish up in New York today. The home series against Detroit went really well for them. Monday they won 2-1 against the Tigers. Max Fried threw 5 1/3 innings. He had 3 walks and 6 Ks. Not his best command, but he managed to kind of scrap through those 5 1/3 innings. Forrest Wall is back with the big league club. He's a really athletic guy overall. He moves well, and he had a big RBI that tied the game in the bottom of the 7th to score Austin Riley. And then in the bottom of the 8th, Ozzie hit one in the chop house and made it 2-1, and that was pretty much the ball game. So shout out to Oz. I love watching that dude swing a bat, especially when he's going right. It's awesome to see. Tuesday's game, also a 2-1 victory. Spencer Swallenbach had another quality start. So his last 2 starts have been really good. His command has looked pretty good as well. Through 6 innings, like I said, he only gave up 1 run. He had 2 walks and 7 Ks. And he looks really good. Like I said, this was a quality start. His last start was a quality start. He just throws strikes, which is huge in today's game. He is definitely more of a pitcher. He's got several pitches that he can throw for strikes. And I'm really interested to see where he goes and how he continues to progress. Ozzie and Ozuna both had RBIs in the bottom of the 1st, and that was pretty much all the scoring for this game. And then Wednesday was a 7-0 shutout for the Braves. The Braves actually beat up on Skubal, who is probably the AL Cy Young favorite at this point in the season. He only threw 4 innings. He gave up 5 runs. And also had 2 walks against the Braves. He did have 7 strikeouts, but like I said, he gave up 5 runs against the Braves. That was huge for them. Sean Murphy went 4 for 4 on this day with 2 homers and 4 RBIs. That was huge for Murph to get going. They need his bat to get going if they are going to be successful. And then Ramon Laureano also homered. And then once again, this guy, Reynaldo Lopez, 5 innings pitched, 1 walk, 6 Ks. That actually brought his ERA down to 1.57. And he doesn't have quite the innings to qualify, so you won't see his like on Baseball Reference or anything like that. But just know that he is having a phenomenal year, and he deserves to be an all-star. I think the Braves have 3 guys that could be all-stars on the pitching side at least, and 1 hitter, and that's Ozuna. But we'll get to that in just a little bit. And then, let's see, they had an off day Thursday. He travels to New York for a series with the Yankees. So Friday, the Braves played, and they actually won 8-1. Chris Sale threw 5 innings, only gave up 1 earned run. He had 3 walks and 8 Ks. Like I said, the 3 walks is a little different for Sale because he's not a guy that typically walks a lot of batters. but he managed to get through 5 innings, only giving up 1 run, and that actually helped bring his ERA down to 2.91. The Braves beat up on Carlos Rodon, which was awesome. He only threw 3 2/3 innings. He gave up 8 runs. He had 2 walks and only 3 Ks. The Braves hit 5 doubles and 3 home runs in this game, en route to an 8-1 victory against the Yankees. Now, my favorite part of this game is that Chris Sale was absolutely gassed up for this game, touching 98, and he actually struck out Juan Soto and Aaron Judge twice in this game. So shout out to Sale, man. He looks fantastic. If they can just get him healthy and into October, he is going to be a real weapon for them. And then yesterday's game was actually their first loss of the week. They lost 8-3 against the Yankees. Charlie Morton didn't look good. He went 5 2/3. He gave up 5 earned runs, but he also had 5 walks. He only had 4 strikeouts. The walks are killing him, and that's what always hurts him: walks and hit by pitches. He had 5 walks, and the Aaron Bummer also had 3 walks. So as a pitching staff, not a great job yesterday. 8 walks total. And the only real bright spot for the offense was Marcell Ozuna hitting a home run, which actually started out the scoring yesterday, but it turns out it didn't really matter. Overall, for the Braves, Orlando Arcia and Adam Duvall are still struggling. They are really having a hard time. Orlando Arcia, it has a negative F4 as of the last 6 to 8 weeks. And for those of you who don't know, that includes defense. I'm not saying that Nacho Alvarez is the answer, but when you look at his stats in AAA, he's got a slash line of 364, 417, and 659. He's hit 3 home runs there in 10 games. He's got 16 hits in 10 games. If the defense is just average defense, and he comes up and he can put up an OBP of 360, 370, that is an upgrade over Orlando Arcia. I like Arcia. Overall, his glove actually looks really good this year, but lately it hasn't been that great. So I know the Braves don't want to rush Nacho because he just turned 21 this year, but at this point, I would really like to see him get a shot. Nacho seems like the kind of guy that could thrive on hitting ninth, and really turn the lineup over well. So I don't know, and I really don't think that Arcia. I don't think that his time is ticking, but it could be because the Braves have shown before that they are not afraid to bring guys up if they feel like they're ready. Adam Duvall is still struggling. I still feel like at the trade deadline, the only move that they really make is they're going to go get an outfield bat, maybe like Jesse Winker, who hits right-handed pitching really well. And that's pretty much the only moves I really see them making at the trade deadline. And then 2 real positives for the Braves. Since Ronald Acuna has gone down, the Braves have been looking for a leadoff man. They had tried out the Michael Harris experiment and the Ozzy Albies experience, and those went okay. But let me just throw this out there. Jarred Kelenic has taken over and owned the leadoff role. He's got a 1.034 OPS, batting first this year. For those of you who don't know, those are Ronald Acuna numbers. He's hitting 371 with a 405 OBP and a 629 slug. That's awesome. He needs to stay there. And since May 21st, I keep bringing this date back up, but that's when he made the stance change. Since that date, he's got an 899 OPS, and he's brought his K rate down to 21%, which is actually pretty good. So I'm really happy to see Kelenic just playing well. He's been doing a great job in the leadoff spot. He runs exceptionally well too. So he's not Ronald Acuna, but he's doing the best he can, and he looks pretty solid hitting leadoff. I like him up there. And then Austin Riley. Austin Riley has been on a real burner. While the team was in Baltimore, Riley met with the late great Mike Brumley, who was his go-to guy as far as his hitting instructor, and Brumley helped him with his swing while he was in Baltimore. And then when they got home, Austin Riley has gone on this just absolute tear. Now, sadly, Mike Brumley just passed away just a couple of weeks ago, right after they left Baltimore. But since Riley met with Brumley and he helped him with his swing, Riley's played in 8 games. Okay. He's got 4 homers and 9 RBIs in that stretch since June 14th. He's hitting .500 and he's slugging over 1,000. Okay, that is not a mistake. He's also got a 1.1 F4 in 8 games. And he looks great at the plate right now. He looks locked in. And he is one of those guys that if the Braves want a chance to win this division and go deep in the postseason, he's one of those guys that has to be right. Because he is one of the catalysts of this offense. So shout out to Riley. I know he's going through some hard times with losing Brumley, but you're making him proud by hitting that well and playing that well. So that pretty much wraps up my Braves update, Joe. Both of our teams have had really good weeks. Some key players are actually playing really well. And then throughout the league, we've actually had some pretty interesting things happen as well. We actually had the first annual Rick Wood Field game in Birmingham, Alabama. It is the oldest ballpark in the U.S. It was built in 1910, and it was home to the Negro Leagues for many, many years. And we actually got to see a professional baseball game played there this week against the Giants and the Cardinals. The Cardinals actually won 6-5. It was actually a really good game. And there was about, I think, 8,000 or 9,000 people in attendance for this. I don't know that if fans like us, Joe, would ever be able to attend a game at Rick Wood, but that would be pretty cool.
That would be.
But it was really cool to see. I hope this is something that MLB continues to do.
Absolutely.
And then what was going to be a game where they honored Willie Mays, they actually did end up honoring him and remembering him because he passed away on Tuesday, I believe, on the 14th, or the 18th. I'm sorry, the 18th. In my honest opinion, I believe that Willie Mays is the greatest position player to have ever played the game. He was a 12-time Gold Glover, a 24-time All-Star. He hit 660 home runs. He stole 339 bags. He's got a lifetime OPS of 940. And according to Baseball Reference, if any of you have ever dug into any stats, they consider a season with 8 B-WAR or better to be an MVP type season. Well, Willie Mays had 11 of those. Now, granted, I think he only had a couple of MVPs to show for it, but in terms of advanced analytics, he had 11 seasons worthy of an MVP. If you go back and look at some of the old highlights of him playing, I've actually been listening to some podcasts about Willie Mays this week. His legacy was just incredible. So he will be dearly missed. But we'll always have those old clips and all of these old podcasts to go back and listen to his greatness and to everything that everybody has ever said about him. So that kind of wraps up Rick Wood and Willie Mays. Joe, what else do we want to talk about today? Do we want to talk about the All-Star stuff?
Yeah, let's go ahead and dive into the All-Star ballot as it stands right now. For the AL, for the catcher position, you got Adley Rutschman and Salvador Perez, 2 guys that have been dominating at the catcher spot, leading the way. And you got Jose Trevino, Danley Jansen, Jonah Heim, and Yainer Diaz to round out the top 6. And then for first baseman, you got Vladimir Guerrero Jr. leading, and then Ryan Mountcastle following close behind. And then Josh Naylor, Anthony Rizzo, Nathaniel Lowe, and Vinny Pasquantino. And then you actually see John Singleton in the top 10 at 7, which I think is kind of funny. But then moving on to second baseman, you've got Jose Altuve, well-deserved because he has been one of the best hitters in the league this year, as he is most years. And then you got Marcus Semien, who is the host of the All-Star Game as it is being held in Arlington. And then you got Michael Massey, Jorge Mateo, Andres Jimenez, and then David Schneider. And you got guys like Gleyber Torres, Brandon Drury, Jorge Polanco, and then Vaughn Grisham in the top 10 for second baseman. Altuve has a pretty big margin, so I'm hoping that he kind of locks that down here soon. The Astros have 3 starters currently as it stands for the All-Star game in terms of voting. And it'd be nice to see a 4th Blanco thrown in there. I'm just saying. I'm gonna keep making my case for him. So moving on to third baseman, you got Jose Ramirez leading the way, and it's not even that race is over. Jose Ramirez will be the starting third baseman for the AL. He leads by a good 400,000 votes. And then second on the list is Jordan Westburg, third Rafael Devers, fourth Oswaldo Cabrera, Isaiah Connor Falefa, Josh Smith, Alex Bregman in the top 7. Luis Rengifo, Isaac Paredes, just not a very strong third base position in the AL. Not a very strong first base position in the AL either, but it is what it is. And then moving on to shortstop, you got Gunnar Henderson leading the way. You got Bobby Witt Jr., 2 MVP candidates right there. You got MVP 1 and MVP 2. But Gunnar Henderson is kind of pulling away from that. Then you got guys like Anthony Volpe, Corey Seager, Bo Bichette, Jeremy Pena in the top 6. Astros have a lot of players in the top 6. I don't know if that's obviously just because the fans keep voting for them like crazy. I don't know if they exactly deserve it. But I think Pena, you could kind of make a case for he deserves it. Bregman, not so much. Singleton, not so much. But moving on to designated hitters, someone who does deserve it very much. Yordan Alvarez is leading the designated hitters. And Giancarlo Stanton is pretty close behind, so I'm hoping that Yordan can keep playing well to kind of pull himself away. He hadn't played very well at the beginning of the season, so the fact that he is leading the All-Star voting is kind of impressive to me because he hasn't played well, and he's kind of turned it around in the recent weeks, and his numbers are already looking so much better. So then moving on to outfielders, you got Aaron Judge, Juan Soto, Kyle Tucker, Steven Kwan, Anthony Santander, and Alex Verdugo, all in the top 6, which means they would all be considered for a starting spot. And if you're in the top 6 for outfield, you move on and then they narrow it down to the top 3 who then start. So Kyle Tucker is currently in 3rd. And there's a pretty big gap between him and Steven Kwan, who's in 4th. So I'm hoping, that he's probably going to lock that down. Aaron Judge and Juan Soto have over 1 million votes. So Kyle Tucker's only way to the All-Star game as a starter would be just continuing to beat out Steven Kwan. I don't know how much his injury and lack of playing in the recent weeks is going to affect that. But he's put up MVP type numbers as well, right beside Aaron Judge, Juan Soto, Gunnar Henderson, and Bobby Witt. So hopefully he can, come back in, the next week and keep where he left off.
Joe, let me say something.
And that really rounds out. Yep, go ahead.
Let me say something real quick about Steven Kwan. For those of you who don't know what's going on with Steven Kwan right now, because he plays in Cleveland, which is kind of a small market, nobody really cares. Steven Kwan is hitting 390 right now. Now, he was on the injured list for a little while, so he's only played in 48 games. But right now he's hitting 390 with an OBP of 449. And there's just something nostalgic about guys hitting for a super high average. If Tucker is still hurt at the All-Star break, which he might be at this point, I'm not really sure. I think it would be kind of cool to see Steven Kwan get the start and potentially even hit leadoff just because of those OBP numbers. Do you want to see Altuve hit leadoff, Joe? Is that what you're telling me? Is that he?
Oh, absolutely! I would love to see Altuve uncork on a first pitch fastball from whoever the in-out. It'd probably be like Ranger Suarez or somebody like that on the Phillies.
Suarez, yeah.
I would love to see Altuve uncork on a first pitch fastball. That would give me, World Series flashbacks. I would love that.
It's true. That's true.
I really need that. I really need that right now.
Well,
With the way that the Astros are playing and with the way that they could be playing by the All-Star break, I need that. Okay.
it would be really interesting to see between guys like Rutschman and Altuve and Ramirez and Gunnar Henderson, who they would actually pick to, like, who Bruce Bochy is going to pick to actually
Oh, it's
hit.
got to be Altuve. It's got to be Altuve.
Because I can't. You can't deny somebody like Gunnar Henderson, who's probably the MVP right now, hitting leadoff as well. Although I could see
But
like
is he?
a Henderson, a Judge, a Soto. That would kill. That would be great. I would take like an Altuve because right now you're looking at Soto and Judge and Henderson are all better than Jordan.
Yeah.
I mean, those top four between Altuve, Henderson, and Soto and Judge, that top four is scary. I would hate to be
That's a
anybody.
crazy lineup. That's a crazy lineup.
Yeah. Well, then
You know what? I'm gonna say one thing about the All-Star game. Hold on.
Go
I'm
ahead.
gonna say one thing. It's probably one of the biggest corks in the history of sports. I kind of miss the winner of the All-Star game, that league getting home field advantage in the World Series. I miss it. I think that was it. It made the All-Star game worth something.
Mm-hmm.
And they took that away. But I think it would be pretty cool to see that brought back. I know that it doesn't make sense because you could have like let's say the NL one in 2019, and you have the 107 win Astros playing on the road to start the series against the 87 win Nationals. But hey, who knows? That could have meant the Astros won the World Series. So
Oh
I don't
man,
know. I'm just saying.
I do wish that there was something to give it more of a more meaning, because there's a lot of guys that will, they choose to take that time off and spend it with their families instead of going to the All-Star game, especially some of your veterans that have been several times. But anyway, so moving on to the National League. Looking at the National League, we'll start with the catchers. You've got William Contreras leading JT Realmuto by a long shot, by probably 200,000 votes. And I think rightfully so. He deserves a start. And also Realmuto's hurt. And then Will Smith is actually in third, right behind Realmuto. So you'll probably see Contreras and Smith there at the All-Star game, at least for catchers. For first baseman, you've got Harper leading by about 300,000 votes over Freddie Freeman. And Bryce Harper 100% deserves to start the All-Star game over Freddie Freeman. Then you got Matt Olson in third, Pete Alonso in fourth, Jake Cronenworth in fifth. Second baseman, this is probably the most interesting thing right here. Because you've got Luis Arias and Ketel Marte within 5,000 votes of each other. With Bryson Stott in third and Ozzy Albies in fourth. Between Arias and Marte, both of them actually, in my opinion, deserve to start the All-Star game. I'm probably going with Ketel Marte, because Ketel Marte, in my opinion, is probably a top 3 MVP candidate right now in the NL, just in terms of WAR. But Luis Arias is obviously having a fantastic year as well. Third baseman, you got Alec Bohm in first by about 800,000 votes. Not kidding. Over Manny Machado. The rest of the third basemen in the National League are very much, to say the least, none of them are really having a great year. So Alec Bohm will start the All-Star game at third base at 100%, and he deserves to. As far as shortstops, this one actually gets a little tricky too, because Mookie Betts is hurt. He actually leads Trey Turner by 500,000 votes. Trey Turner actually just came off the IL, so more than likely you'll see him start the All-Star game. With Ellie De La Cruz in third and Orlando Arcia in fourth. But that's by a long shot as well. And Orlando Arcia is not an All-Star. Please do not put him on the All-Star team. That's coming from a Braves fan. He is not an All-Star. And then designated hitters. You've got Ohtani and Ozuna that are 1-2. Ohtani leads Ozuna by 500,000 votes, even though their numbers are a lot closer than that. And then you've got Schwarber in third, followed by Rhys Hoskins in fourth. And then the rest of them, it kind of falls off from there. And then outfielders. Let me just say this: the National League outfielders overall, none of them are as talented as Judge or Soto or Kyle Tucker or anybody like
Tucker.
that. You've got Jurickson Profar, who finally decided that he was going to be an all-star, like what people thought he was going to be 10 years ago. He is actually leading all go-getters in the outfield. Then you've got Christian Yelich, and you've got Fernando Tatis Jr., and then you've got Teoscar Hernandez, who I actually feel like should probably start the All-Star game, in my opinion. He's actually had a pretty good year. And then you got Brandon Marsh.
As I predicted.
Yes. And then you've got Brandon Marsh and Nick Castellanos. And then to fill up the top 10, you've got Johan Rojas, Cody Bellinger, Eloy Ramos, and Jason Hayward. And then looking at the rest of the National League, none of them are good. None of them are good. That is where the NL is going to suck overall. Joe was saying that the Astros are probably going to have 4 All-Stars. I think the Braves are probably going to have 4 as well. You're going to have Marcell Ozuna as probably the only position player, but then you're probably going to have 3 pitchers. You're going to have Chris Sale. You should have Reynaldo Lopez and probably Max Fried. But let me just say this, Joe. I'm going to throw this out there, okay? I want to see one guy from the Braves make the All-Star team, and it's a reliever. This dude is 40 years old, and it's Jesse Chavez, okay? Jesse Chavez was actually drafted in 2002, okay? He's got 13 years of big league service time, and this year, he's pitched in 25 games. He's thrown 32 innings, 32 and 2/3. He's got an ERA plus of 3.02 right now, which is just unreal, and an ERA of 1.38. Most people in Braves country believe that this is going to be his final season. I want to get Jesse Chavez to the All-Star game. I don't even care if he pitches. I'm sure he doesn't care if he pitches either. But his ERA is unreal, and every time this guy puts on a Braves uniform, he is a different person. In 190 career innings with the Braves, he's got an ERA of 2.78. That's a pretty darn good reliever. So a lot of people call him Coach in Braves country. So I am putting that out there. Get Coach to Texas. Get Coach to Texas. I want to see Jesse Chavez make it to the All-Star game in his final season, more than likely at age 40. So that's pretty much wraps up the All-Star game. We don't know anything about the pitchers yet, although we know who can pitch and who can't pitch. So other than that, Joe, what else do we need to talk about today? Are we missing anything?
No, I think that about wraps it up. I think we covered pretty much everything we wanted to talk about so far.
Definitely. I think the last couple things is that we also saw Garrett Cole make his return to the big leagues on a Yankee team that has actually pitched exceptionally well this year. And then another thing that we saw yesterday is I really hope that Ahmed Rosario is okay after getting drilled by Jared Jones in the face yesterday. So I'm hoping that Ahmed Rosario is doing well because I watched that clip several times and I cannot imagine taking 100 off the face. But he took it like a champ and walked off under his own power. Other than that, Joe, I don't think there's anything else we need to cover. Do you?
Yeah, no. I guess one thing I saw was yesterday, a stat saying that the Astros, who currently lead the league in batting average, are hitting 261, and I believe I don't remember what year, I think it was like 2002, that was the league average. So I think that's kind of a crazy stat. I think that has a lot to do with the shift. I know that they banned the shift, but I mean, you can still really play around with it. So I thought that was an interesting stat that I saw yesterday.
Definitely.
But other than that, I think that wraps it up.
Last thing I'm going to end on, Joe, and I said this to you a few days ago during the Brickwood game. I want to mention a person named Bill Greason. Bill is 99 years old. He is the oldest living Negro League player that is still around. He also grew up across the street from Martin Luther King Jr. He took part in the Battle of Iwo Jima. And he has also he was a pastor for 53 years at Bethel Baptist Church. Bill Greason has lived a full and complete life. And I just thought that he was worth mentioning on this podcast. So shout out to Bill Greason. I'm just looking at the life and legacy that he is going to leave amongst family and friends is just incredible. So thank you everybody for. Go ahead, Joe.
Breaking news.
Well,
The Yankees plays outfielder / DH Giancarlo Stanton on 10-day injured list with left hamstring strain.
Wow, that's good news for the Braves because they're about to play in about 3 hours. Wow. Okay, well, hopefully my team goes 5-1 on the week. Thank you everybody for listening.
Hopefully mine does too.
Yes, let's hope that our teams go 5-1, Joe. Thank you everybody for listening to our pod today. Please remember to like, share, and subscribe to our YouTube channel. That really helps the show and helps us grow. And then also too, you can listen to us on Apple Podcast, the Throwing Partners Podcast. You can see our logo right there. And then if you can, and if you have time, guys, please put up a review for us. A 5-star review helps the show as well, and it helps more people see our show. So thank you, everybody. Have a wonderful Sunday.